The morning sunlight danced on the polished floors of the luxury car dealership as high-end models gleamed beneath designer lights, each car a masterpiece of engineering and opulence. Employees in sharp navy blue suits moved with pride and precision, exchanging polite nods with clients dressed in tailored coats and designer handbags. Into the showroom of extravagance walked a woman who seemed a world apart. Dressed in worn sneakers, a loose beige t-shirt, and faded jeans, she looked around timidly, her curious eyes scanning the showroom as though it were a foreign palace. Her hair, tied loosely, fell over her shoulder, and she clutched a small cloth purse tightly, as though afraid it might slip away. The receptionist's practiced smile faltered as she noticed her. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone stiff. The woman, whose name was Aiko, nodded politely. "I'm here to look at the new Bentley," she said softly, almost hesitantly, as though she already anticipated resistance. From afar on the floor, an ambitious young salesman named Trevor observed the exchange. He smirked and strolled over, his shoes clicking arrogantly across the tiles. "The Bentley," he repeated, giving her outfit a quick, judgmental scan. "Ma'am, perhaps you'd feel more comfortable looking at our pre-owned selection, or perhaps something in another dealership," he added with a forced grin. Aiko's expression remained calm, her posture straight despite the rising murmurs from the other staff nearby. "I'm interested in the Continental GT," she said again with a quiet strength. "That car starts at over $250,000, Trevor replied, louder this time, making sure others could hear. "We don't allow window shopping. Our clients usually make appointments." A few salesmen chuckled from a distance. Embarrassed, Aiko looked down but didn't move. Her eyes glanced again at the car, as if trying to memorize it. "I see," she said gently. "Thank you anyway." She turned around slowly, walking past the sea of eyes that had already labeled her. Some smirked, others whispered. Trevor leaned into his colleague and said, "Probably got lost on her way to a used Honda lot." Outside, Aiko paused for a moment, taking one last look through the glass. Then she reached into her purse and tapped her phone, whispering into it, "It's done." No one inside knew that she was not just a simple woman. No one suspected that her husband, Kaito Watanabe, billionaire founder of one of Japan's largest tech firms, was the silent owner of the very dealership that had just dismissed her. The trap had been set, and the quiet humiliation they thought they served would soon be returned tenfold. The following morning, the luxury dealership buzzed with its usual rhythm. Espresso machines hummed in the lounge, glass doors slid open for the day's first clients, and salesmen rehearsed their pitches in front of mirror-like car hoods. But all activity came to a screeching halt when the unmistakable growl of AV-12 engine rolled into the parking lot, smooth as silk yet carrying an authority that turned every head. A black Rolls-Royce Phantom, polished to a mirror shine, glided into view, its golden spirit of ecstasy glinting like a crown under the sun. Behind its tinted windows, the presence inside remained hidden, but the opulence of the vehicle alone sent whispers rippling through the staff, many of whom hurried to the front, brushing down their suits and fixing their ties in anticipation of what they assumed must be a dignitary or foreign prince. The vehicle halted with precision, and from the rear door stepped out the same woman they had mocked just a day before, Aiko, now in the same modest clothes, but carrying herself with the same calm grace, her eyes sweeping over the shocked faces of the employees with quiet recognition, yet no malice. From the front, the chauffeur stepped out next, a sharp man in black gloves who opened the door, then approached the nearest salesman and handed him a slim black envelope, embossed with gold Japanese lettering. Trevor, standing dumbfounded near the glass entrance, watched as the senior manager read the letter aloud, his voice faltering as the words registered. To the staff of Watanabe Motors, this is a reminder that every person who walks through your door deserves respect, regardless of appearance, especially when that person's husband owns the ground you walk on. Stunned silence followed, broken only by the slow, deliberate footsteps of Aiko as she re-entered the dealership, not to browse, but to inspect, to observe the faces that had so quickly judged her. The regional director, now pale, scrambled forward to greet her, offering a deep and panicked bow, while Trevor stood frozen, color draining from his face, realizing not only his mistake, but the magnitude of the person he had disrespected. Aiko looked around slowly, then turned to the director and said, We need to talk about how you train your employees. Before walking toward the manager's office, leaving behind an air of silent dread and a showroom that would never forget the day a simple woman arrived in a Rolls Royce to teach them what class truly means. By midday, the news had exploded across social media, rippling through corporate circles and digital tabloids alike. Simple woman kicked out of dealership turns out to be billionaire's wife. Read the top headline on the automotive industry's most reputable blog, while a side-by-side video comparison of Aiko's mistreatment and her grand return in a Rolls-Royce Phantom amassed millions of views in hours, igniting outrage, praise, and fierce debate in the comment sections across platforms from Tokyo to London. Back inside the dealership, chaos brewed behind its now pristine glass walls. Corporate executives were dialing into emergency meetings. PR agents were issuing rushed apologies, and staff members huddled near the back offices, whispering nervously about disciplinary action, fearing that layoffs were imminent. In the heart of it all, Aiko sat calmly in the general manager's office, sipping tea quietly while the regional director stammered through half-baked apologies, his voice cracking under the pressure of trying to appear composed before the woman whose power he had so grossly misjudged. Across from her, Marcus, the arrogant sales manager who had orchestrated her public humiliation, had been called and under official review and stood now like a man awaiting sentence, sweat beading at his temples, his voice dry as he mumbled about miscommunication and store policy, his polished arrogance having entirely dissolved. Aiko met his eyes for the first time since that day and said nothing cruel, no dramatic insult or triumphant lecture. Instead, she simply asked, "Do you think you would have treated your own mother like that as she walked in here?" "Eh?" Question so calm and precise that it struck harder than any punishment, leaving Marcus visibly shaken and speechless as the regional director sighed and turned to a legal advisor with a nod. Moments later, Marcus was escorted off the premises. His badge turned in, his legacy at the dealership ended not with drama, but with shame. Meanwhile, outside, reporters had begun to arrive, crowding behind the velvet ropes now hastily installed at the dealership's entrance, hoping to catch a glimpse of the woman they now called the Billionaire's Grace. But Aiko made no appearance. Instead, she and Kaito met quietly in a private boardroom upstairs, where the billionaire listened as his wife calmly laid out her recommendations for employee reform, inclusion training, and a new code of conduct that he approved without hesitation. Not because she was his wife, but because her composure, insight, and moral clarity made her a better leader than most executives he'd ever hired. He then revealed a second surprise, a controlling share in the very dealership, silently gifted to Aiko months ago as a token of trust and love, but now formally signed into her name, making her not just a symbolic figure, but the actual owner of the business that had once dismissed her. That evening, long after the reporters had given up waiting and the staff had gone home in silence, Aiko stood alone in the dim showroom, looking at the Bentley she had first come in to see, not with the hunger of someone seeking validation, but with the serene satisfaction of someone who knew exactly who she was all along. In the weeks that followed the scandal, Aiko Watanabe's name began appearing in places far removed from luxury cars and social media gossip. Finance magazines ran features on her sudden emergence as a dealership co-owner. Business blogs praised her strategic restructuring of internal policies, and women's empowerment forums heralded her as a modern icon of dignity under pressure, dubbing her the quiet lioness for the way she transformed personal humiliation into systemic reform. Yet despite the spotlight, Aiko refused interviews, declined public comment, and instead focused her energy on quietly reshaping the company from within, showing up at the dealership several times a week, not in flashy clothes or accompanied by guards, but in the same modest style she had always worn, her presence grounded and unpretentious. Her authority felt rather than flaunted. Under her guidance, the dealership introduced a new mentorship initiative for women entering the automotive industry, updated its code of conduct to enforce zero tolerance for classist or discriminatory behavior, and began anonymously reviewing client treatment through monthly audits, all funded in part by a newly created equity grant from Aiko's shared dividends. At first, many employees were skeptical, unsure if the silent, kind-eyed woman could truly shift a culture rooted in ego and image, but as they watched her speak to entry-level staff with genuine warmth, work late into evenings over policy documents, and learn the business not as an heiress, but as a student, Even the cynics began to admire her, slowly realizing she wasn't performing power. She was transforming it. Meanwhile, Kaido remained her unwavering ally, silently coordinating corporate support behind the scenes, declining invitations to press conferences in favor of watching Aiko take charge, his pride evident not in grand gestures, but in the quiet. Wade placed his hand on her shoulder when no one else was looking, knowing this chapter of their life belonged to her. The dealership itself saw a surge in interest, not because of its inventory, but because customers now came hoping to meet the woman they'd read about, the one who didn't yell, didn't sue, didn't threaten, but simply walked back into a room that had once shamed her and changed it without ever raising her voice. And when a television crew finally caught her on camera, stepping out of her now iconic black Phantom in the same outfit she'd worn that first day, and helping an elderly customer navigate the stairs without realizing she was being filmed, the internet broke again. But this time, it wasn't scandal that drew attention. It was the rare sight of someone who held power but chose compassion. Someone who could dominate headlines but chose instead to rewrite an industry's values quietly, precisely, and permanently point one bright spring afternoon under a soft breeze that carried the scent of cherry blossoms blooming outside the city. Aiko Watanabe returned once again to the dealership that had once shunned her, not with fanfare, not for business, but for a very personal appointment that only she and a few trusted staff had arranged. A sleek, silver van arrived shortly after her, and from it stepped a group of wide-eyed schoolgirls in navy uniforms, their eyes widening at the gleaming glass structure before them, the same place they'd seen on screens and in magazines. Most of them came from struggling schools in lesser-known prefectures, and none had ever stepped foot in a luxury store before. But today they weren't here to shop. They were here to learn, to see what possibility looked like when shaped by grace instead of arrogance, when power dressed in humility. Aiko greeted them all with her signature warm bow and led them inside, personally introducing them to each staff member now retrained under her quietly enforced policies, showing the girls not just cars, but also the engine of how a business is run, the finance, the negotiation, the ethics behind transaction. One girl, shy and trailing at the back, whispered, "They wouldn't let you in once, right?" And Aiko smiled gently, replying, "And that's why I opened the door wider than it was before," a sentence that lingered in the young minds like a seed. Upstairs, in the executive office that bore her nameplate in gold, Aiko hosted a short workshop, teaching them the basics of confidence, not through posture or tone, but through clarity of self, showing them a framed photo of herself in her first job, in a tiny bakery in Osaka, and another of the moment she was handed her dealership shares, reminding them that both women in those pictures were the same person. Kaido arrived quietly halfway through, standing at the back with folded arms and a soft smile, content not to interrupt, but simply to witness the ripple of his wife's legacy extend toward a new generation. Later that day, as the girls posed for photos beside Bentleys and Lamborghinis, Aiko stepped aside to make a final phone call. This time, not to correct a wrong, but to build a future. She spoke to her foundation coordinator, confirming the launch of a new program that would place underprivileged girls into paid internships across the country in automotive and design industries, with scholarships tied to academic excellence and leadership. And then, as the sun began to dip, casting golden light on the glassy surfaces and reflecting the smiling faces of the girls in the cars they once only dreamed of, Aiko walked them out, handing each one a small envelope, not with money, but with a letter inside that read, "May you always remember that silence is not weakness, and dignity is louder than any voice that mocks you." The black Rolls Royce pulled up once more, its presence now familiar, and as Aiko stepped in beside Kaido, one of the girls chased behind the car, waving and shouting, "I'll come back here as your partner one day." A promise that made Aiko laugh for the first time that day, her heart full, not from victory, but from the simple joy of knowing that she had turned a moment of insult into a bridge for others, and built a future from the very place where someone once told her she didn't belong.